Welcome, and thank you for joining me for this presentation titled When Intuition is Real, but Clarity Doesn't Last. So, this is an orientation for people who already know intuition is real, but have noticed that clarity doesn't always stay. This isn't about learning a new method, it's about understanding why insight fades and what actually stabilizes it over time. You don't need to take notes and just notice what resonates as we go. Now, most people recognize this pattern immediately. Insight comes through and feels true in the moment. Then doubt starts to creep in, clarity blurs, action stalls, not because intuition has failed, but because there was nowhere for that insight to land and stay. When this happens, most people blame themselves. They think that they're not intuitive enough, that they need more information, more belief, more confidence. But those fixes don't work. And the reason matters. So, clarity isn't missing. What is missing is structure. Without structure, perception destabilizes, insight becomes conditional, and intuition starts to feel unreliable. Now, this isn't a personal failure. This is a structural problem. Now, before I go any further, I want to introduce myself. My name is Janie. I worked with the Akashic Records for over a decade, not as a belief system, but as a relational practice. My focus has always been on consistency, structure, and discernment because that's what allows intuition to become usable in real life instead of something you have to manage. So let's talk about why this keeps happening. So intuition is subtle. It doesn't arrive as certainty or command or dramatic knowing. Most often, it comes as a quiet recognition, as a partial insight, a relational awareness. And subtle clarity requires containment to stay stable. So usually when I start working with my clients, they say something like, I kept thinking I wasn't intuitive enough. So they started to work on their intuition and building their intuition skills. But the insight was there. What happened was that it just didn't stay. So they really didn't need more intuition. They needed the structure. So let's talk about why effort doesn't fix this. So trying harder usually makes things worse because it creates overinterpretation. There's mental loops. There's a sense of urgency and a pressure to get things right. And effort tends to increase noise and anxiety. That's how you feel it in the body. And it doesn't stabilize clarity. So the missing piece here is that clarity stabilizes in relationship, not isolation. So not necessarily in relationship with a teacher or not dependence on authority. That was an old model. We're moving away from that as our human consciousness is developing. But a relationship with structure, with rhythm, with consistent orientation, and with a shared field of practice. So, structure, what it does is that it starts to regulate the nervous system. It reduces interpretation noise, it creates a perception safety, it allows trust to build over time. And without structure, intuition stays fragile, no matter how real it is. And it's really hard to create that container on your own. So clients usually say something like, I wasn't confused because I didn't know anything. And in fact, they start recognizing that they're getting these intuitive hits, but they're confused because there was nothing that was holding what they knew. So the idea of structure or a container which begins to hold what you know. And a lot of times having that container be bigger than you, where it's not just you who is holding the container, is really important, especially as you get started. So let's talk about why just practicing on your own usually breaks down. Self-practice usually breaks down because perception gets tangled. Certain topics stay foggy, insights tend to repeat without integrating, and clarity tends to come and go, or at least that it feels like it does. So this isn't a lack of ability, it's a lack of containment and really a lack of integration and follow through. And so with self-practice, it's really easy to lose the thread. And I used to say that a lot when I was starting and when I'm having trouble with something, that's a sense that I get about losing the thread. So this is where I hope you're starting to understand that what's the problem is that there hasn't been anything that's holding your intuitive hits. So if you want a place where clarity doesn't fade and intuition doesn't have to be managed alone, that's what the Akashic Field community is designed for. And you're going to hear more about that as we continue. Now, the turning point comes when you realize this isn't something I need to figure out alone. And not because you can't, but because it's much more difficult to hold it on your own because clarity changes in the right environment with that right structure. So, what actually stabilizes clarity? It stabilizes through consistent orientation. There's a clean entry and exit, there's a shared language, there's relational feedback, and there's pacing that supports the body. We want to make sure that we don't forget the body because, after all, we are here on this planet and our body needs to integrate what we receive. Now, this isn't a technique. So, these things here, what stabilizes clarity isn't a technique, it's a container. And that's what is so important. The Akashic field is designed to do this. It's a structured environment designed to hold perception steady, to support trust without pressure, and to allow intuition to mature naturally. So insight can integrate into real life. Now, what the community does is that it doesn't do more teaching because information doesn't stabilize intuition. And in fact, we have an abundance of information. What we need is environment. So the field provides structure without hierarchy, support without dependence, clarity without force, and rhythm instead of urgency. Now, for some people, clarity stabilizes through regular engagement. In the engaged path, the focus is on practicing with structure, recognizing interference, translating insight without urgency, and building trust through repetition. There's nothing to prove, there's rhythm and containment. And that's what the engaged path in the community does. And so once you start engaging, you're going to start realizing that you don't really need more practices. What you need is a place where you can practice without pressure, and not just that is going to contain the information. So you need that container, but it's also going to structure the practice. What happens inside the field? People usually often experience steadier intuition. There's less second guessing. There's a clearer translation. There's a process that we use to arrive at that translation. There's a calmer decision making, and there's reduced urgency around insight. So we are not worried about instant knowledge, but consistency. That's what we're trying to build. So usually, once we start engaging, we start noticing that our intuitive hits are not dramatic. What happens is that we stop arguing with ourselves after we get clarity. So we don't go into that mental loop or second guessing. This is not about more doing. That's not what we're doing in the community. It's not about more practice or more effort or more spiritual work. What we're doing is there's less strain, there's more coherence. That's what we're building. We're building stable perception and trust that holds. Let's talk about who this is for. So, this is a space for you if your intuition is real but inconsistent, if your clarity tends to fade when you're taking action, if there's insight that feels close but it's unstable, or you're tired of just figuring it out on your own. But this space is definitely not for somebody who wants quick answers or is only looking for predictions, where you're looking for dramatic experiences, kind of out of body type things. That's not what we're doing here. We want to be grounded and we want to apply it to our lives. And we definitely don't want to outsource our authority. The field supports sovereignty, not dependence. And there's, of course, different levels of engagement. You can engage by meeting the records, by practicing with structure, or by integrating clarity into your daily life. There's really no hierarchy. There's only different depths of relationship that you can build in the community. So when clarity becomes a living relationship, that is what we're trying to build. Some people reach a point where insight informs how they move through daily life. And this is what we call the partner path. This is where we emphasize integrating guidance into real decisions, tracking clarity across time, recognizing long-term patterns and how to shift them, and allowing intuition to shape your action naturally. Again, this isn't about intensity. What we're focused on is continuity. And you're going to find that at some point, it stops being something, the Akashic Records or intuition stop being something that you check into, but it starts informing how you make decisions. It really starts integrating into your life. And the reason why this works is because clarity stabilizes in rhythm. There is perception that strengthens through consistency, and safe containers tend to help trust to grow and develop. And relationship is really going to allow intuition to mature. So if you recognize yourself here, if you can feel how close clarity already is, then the field is where this work actually lives. The way to continue is inside the Akashic Field community. It is a grounded space for stabilizing intuition, for restoring trust, for integrating clarity over time. And it is a living practice. We don't just want to try harder. We want to build the right environment and we want to be within that environment. And the relationship here has already begun. You've already are being invited to participate in the relationship. Now, our goal is to get to the point where we stop asking, am I doing it right? Because that relationship and that trust is building within you. Now, the engage and partner paths all have core access. So you can see that there is community access, there's a shared energetic field, there's monthly theme framing, there's orientation and pin post. And then we have both a divinizing life focus and a divinizing business focus, depending on where you are most interested in engaging. And then the engaging path and the partner path then have different additional resources that you can see here. So in the engaging, it's much more about practice. And in the partnering, there's much more coaching and hot seat coaching, that type of group environment type support. So if you're ready to join us inside the Akashic Field, I welcome you. You can check out more information inside the sacredcollabs.com, the Akashic Field. I look forward to seeing you there.